Tonight, a revered religious leader's world collapsed, and what you're about to see will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. The courtroom went silent until two men stepped forward and revealed secrets that shook the world of faith to its core. He preached love and trust, but behind closed doors, he destroyed innocence. And now, the truth is finally out. What happens when the man the world calls a leader is exposed as a monster? You won't believe the evidence that came to light today. A video surfaced, testimony shattered a kingdom of trust, and millions were left in disbelief. This isn't just a scandal, it's history in the making. Everything you knew about Bishop Hale was a lie, and today, the world finally saw the truth. He welcomed them like family, but stole their innocence. 7-year-olds trapped in silence until now. The courtroom would never be the same. Breaking news rocked the city tonight as a packed courtroom became the stage for a story that seemed impossible to believe. One of the country's most respected religious leaders, Bishop Jonathan Hale, found himself facing allegations that could destroy his reputation forever. Two men, Michael and David, stepped forward with stories that shook everyone present to their core. The moment the courtroom doors swung open, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. The atmosphere was electric, charged with a mixture of anticipation, fear, and disbelief. Cameras flashed relentlessly, reporters shouted over one another, and thousands of viewers around the world tuned into live streams, eyes glued to every second. It wasn't just another trial, something fundamental had shifted. The walls of the courtroom, usually echoing with the quiet shuffle of papers and the stern gavel of the judge, now vibrated with tension, almost as if the air itself was aware of the storm that was about to break. Michael and David stepped through the doors together, fragile in appearance, yet radiating a determination that seemed to fill the room. Their movements were careful, almost tentative, as though each step was weighed down by years of memories too painful to revisit. Their hands trembled visibly, quivering like leaves in a winter wind, while their eyes, haunted, raw, and swollen from sleepless nights, revealed the magnitude of their courage. Every blink, every shudder, every subtle shift of their posture spoke volumes about the burden they carried. Even before they spoke, the courtroom felt their presence. Judges, lawyers, reporters, and spectators alike felt a collective tightening of the chest, a silent recognition that what was about to unfold would not be ordinary. For years, these two men had been shadows in society's periphery, quiet, silenced, and unseen. Now, they were stepping into the harsh glare of the spotlight, exposing truths that had been buried in darkness for decades. As they reached the front, the silence in the courtroom was deafening. It was the kind of quiet that comes just before a storm, where every heartbeat feels amplified, every breath seems louder than usual. The judge leaned forward slightly, sensing the weight of the moment, while the gallery of spectators shifted uneasily in their seats. Even the usual rustling of papers and the soft tapping of pens seemed to pause, as if the room collectively knew the silence would soon be shattered. Michael raised his hands slightly, gripping the edge of the podium, his knuckles pale from the force of his grip. His voice, when it came, was quiet at first, barely above a whisper, yet it carried an intensity that cut through the charged air like a knife. "I was 7 years old," he said, his words trembling yet resolute. 7 years old when everything I believed about safety, trust, and love was stolen from me. His eyes scanned the room, meeting the gaze of reporters, spectators, and even the defendants at the table. There was no hesitation, no faltering in his confession. It was raw, unfiltered pain finally given voice, and the room recoiled collectively, as if absorbing the magnitude of years of silent suffering. David's turn followed swiftly. His face glistened with tears that hadn't yet fallen, a mixture of anger, fear, and lingering disbelief etched into every line. When he spoke, his voice cracked, echoing in the courtroom in a way that made even the most hardened journalists pause. "It wasn't just our childhoods that were taken," he said, trembling but firm. "It was our faith. It was our trust. It was our very souls. And for years, the world didn't see. They applauded him while we carried the weight of every secret, every fear, every silence imposed upon us." The courtroom reacted instantly. Gasps filled the air. Some reporters dropped their pens, mothers in the gallery clutched their children tightly, and fathers sat frozen, disbelief written across their faces. The room's energy shifted again, heavier now, loaded with tension that could almost be touched. Every spectator felt it, the weight of decades of trauma laid bare, the courage it took to speak, and the undeniable reality of the truth finally emerging from the shadows. As Michael and David continued, recounting memories of fear, manipulation, and enforced silence. The room became a crucible of emotion. Their voices, though fragile at times, rang with a resonance that demanded to be heard. Every story, every pause, every tear shed was a reminder of the years of suffering hidden behind closed doors. And in that moment, the courtroom, once a place of procedure and legal formality, was transformed into a stage for truth, justice, and raw humanity. By the time they finished, the silence that followed was nothing like before. It was heavier, denser, filled with the understanding that what had been revealed would not be easily forgotten. Michael and David had entered trembling and exhausted, but they left an indelible mark on every person present. Their courage had turned whispers into undeniable truths, shaking the very foundations of a world that had long been complacent, and proving that, even in the darkest of circumstances, the human spirit could rise, speak, and demand to be heard. Michael's voice broke the silence. "I was just 7 years old," he said. "Bishop Hale welcomed me like family, but behind closed doors, he took my innocence. He told us to stay quiet, to never speak of it." Gasps echoed across the room. Microphones tipped over, and the courtroom froze. Then David rose, tears streaming down his face. "He didn't just take our childhood," David said, his voice raw. "He stole our faith, our trust, our very souls. The man the world calls a leader, he's a wolf in sheep's clothing." Some screamed. Others wept. On the large screen behind them, a blurry video surfaced, showing Bishop Hale entering private rooms with children, just enough to ignite outrage. Social media exploded. Hashtags calling him out trended worldwide within minutes. Hale sat in shock, muttering that it was all a setup, a lie, but the public demanded answers. This was no ordinary scandal. This felt like the collapse of a kingdom built on trust and admiration. Inside the courtroom, every camera, every pen, every eye was fixed on Michael and David. They carried decades of trauma, ready to confront a man once seen as untouchable. Michael gripped the microphone, his hands shaking. "I was 7, he said again, voice breaking. 7 years old when he made me feel like family. But behind closed doors, I was his victim. He told me God wanted me silent." The room gasped. Reporters dropped their equipment. Parents pulled their children close. David's face was red, his voice raw with years of suppressed pain. "He stole everything," he cried. "Not just our bodies, not just our childhood. He stole our faith, our trust in humanity. While the world praised him, we lived in silence, carrying scars that never healed." The judge called for order as cries of "monster" and "fraud" erupted from the gallery. Hale's face glistened with sweat as he whispered denials, but the crowd was no longer listening. Then another bombshell. A grainy video clip played, showing Hale entering a side room late at night with children. The faces were blurred, but the damage was done. Outside, social media went into chaos. Thousands spoke out, claiming similar experiences. Allegations of hush payments and institutional cover-ups surfaced. The courtroom gasped again when leaked documents suggested that whispers of misconduct had been ignored for years in order to protect the church's image. Michael collapsed in the courtroom, shaking as paramedics rushed to him. Cameras never stopped rolling. When he regained composure, he stared directly at Hale. "You destroyed my life," he said, voice raw and eyes red. "I tried to end my life 3 times because of what you did. While you preached to millions, I lived in hell. Today, I'm not hiding anymore." The crowd wept openly. Security restrained enraged spectators. For the first time, Hale's carefully built empire seemed vulnerable. He stood, defiant, claiming it was a conspiracy, but nobody believed him. News outlets flooded the world with live coverage, and former supporters rushed to distance themselves. Outside the courthouse, thousands of protesters held signs demanding justice. Some screamed into megaphones, others wept openly. A mother holding her daughter in her arms shouted, "What if it was your child? Would you still defend him?" Her words echoed through the streets, heavy with the weight of lost innocence and shattered faith. By the time the first recess was called, it was clear this was not just a courtroom drama. It was history unfolding. A tragedy that would leave scars on the church, its followers, and the nation's consciousness. Michael and David's revelations had transformed whispers into a nationwide reckoning. The storm was far from over. A storm was tearing through the world of faith, shaking the very foundations of a man once untouchable. The allegations against Bishop Jonathan Hale were so heavy that even his most loyal followers began to question everything they believed. Within days of the initial courtroom revelations, the internet caught fire. Hashtags like #exposed_Hale, #childhood_truth, and #church cover-up trended globally, sparking outrage and disbelief. But it wasn't just online chatter. Major networks picked up the story, news anchors speaking in hushed, somber tones. They called it one of the most devastating scandals in modern ministry. Stories of manipulation, trauma, and secrecy spread like wildfire, leaving millions struggling to reconcile the image of a revered leader with the allegations now laid bare. Michael and David, once anonymous voices hidden in the shadows, suddenly became household names. Appearing on talk shows, they recounted their experiences with raw honesty. There were no polished statements, no rehearsed lines, just trembling voices, eyes red from tears, and pain that spilled over. When David said, "I was just a child," and he knew it, viewers around the world felt a shiver run down their spines. This wasn't just an accusation, it was a reopened wound witnessed by millions. The church tried to respond, but vague statements about spiritual trials and attacks from the enemy only fueled the fire. Once trusted words of faith now sounded hollow. Former members began speaking out, revealing eerily similar stories of secrecy, late-night meetings, hush money, and even destroyed records. Then came the leaks. Sealed court documents mysteriously appeared online, and within them were shocking details. Letters allegedly written by Hale in his youth, confessions, and testimonies from people claiming to have witnessed abusive incidents. Authenticity aside, the documents spread instantly. Screenshots and PDFs flooded social media, dissected line by amateur sleuths and professional journalists alike. The most startling revelation came in the form of a grainy black-and-white video. It showed a younger Hale in a closed-door church meeting, surrounded by leaders whispering in hushed tones. He looked nervous, muttering about temptation and seeking forgiveness for past actions. While the footage didn't prove abuse, it planted deep seeds of doubt in millions of minds. The scandal quickly spilled beyond the church. Celebrities canceled appearances, gospel artists ended collaborations, and politicians who had once publicly praised Hale distanced themselves. Netflix reportedly paused production on a faith-based documentary involving him and the empire he had built. Books, films, conferences, global ministries teetered on collapse. Meanwhile, the families of Michael and David became targets of both praise and hate. Some called them heroes, brave survivors finally speaking out. Others branded them liars or tools of a darker force. Michael's home was vandalized overnight with the word liar spray-painted across the walls. David's mother received anonymous calls warning her son to stay silent, or else. What began as allegations had now become a cultural earthquake, splitting congregations, families, and communities. Pastors who had once idolized Hale were forced to issue statements distancing themselves. TV networks pulled reruns of sermons. Bookstores quietly removed his books. Hollywood projects were shelved overnight. Then came the final, chilling testimony. A mysterious witness, known only as Michael, spoke from behind a screen with his voice digitally altered. He claimed not only to have been abused, but to have seen others targeted as well. Entire groups of children, he said, suffered under the church's secrecy, and some never survived the trauma. He alleged cover-ups involving law enforcement, community leaders, and even high-ranking church officials. Whether every detail was true or not, the impact was devastating. The courtroom shook with sobs and gasps. Jurors and reporters alike struggled to contain their emotions. The judge repeatedly called for recesses to calm the room, but outside, the battle raged on. Supporters knelt in the rain, chanting hymns through megaphones. Protesters shouted their outrage, holding signs that read, "Justice for the children" and "Monster in the pulpit." Drone footage captured thousands, divided and crying beneath stormy skies, a visual testament to the chaos unleashed. By nightfall, the world had changed. Bishop Jonathan Hale's once celebrated empire had become synonymous with scandal, betrayal, and heartbreak. For millions, it wasn't just the fall of one man, it was the collapse of an institution they had trusted to protect them. Social media erupted in memorial-like posts. People shared videos of sermons they once admired, now captioned with sorrow and anger. Some burned his books on live streams, tears mixing with smoke as they cried. Was it all a lie? Could words that once healed now conceal secrets that destroyed? Across the globe, faith, trust, and innocence had been shaken to their very core. And in that moment, one truth became impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a scandal, it was a tragedy of biblical proportions. The The fall of Bishop Jonathan Hale wasn't a headline anymore. It was history etched in betrayal, sorrow, and shattered trust. As the dust settled, the world asked a haunting question: how many more secrets were still buried in the shadows? Once revered, Hale's name now echoed as a symbol of broken faith, lost innocence, and hidden darkness. Michael and David had ripped away the mask, revealing the nightmare behind the public persona. Witches broke out, police intervened, and viral footage showed children being pulled from the crowd, crying. Then came a devastating revelation. A young woman appeared on social media, claiming to be a distant relative of Hale. Her voice shook as she alleged her cousin had been silenced with threats. She shared old messages hinting at trauma and fear. Within hours, her account vanished, leaving only the screen recordings saved by thousands of users. The emotional weight of the scandal was crushing. Hale had preached about healing, redemption, and restoration, but now the world asked, how could someone who spoke of God's love live such darkness in secret? Michael and David, though brave, carried their own unbearable guilt. Michael admitted, "I stayed silent too long." And in that silence, others may have been hurt. His voice trembled under the weight of survivor guilt. David confessed, "Part of me wants to believe he was good, but another part knows the truth of what I lived through." The tragedy continued to unfold, leaving one question lingering: would Hale's empire collapse, or could it somehow silence the storm? Silence, it seemed, was as dangerous as the truth. What began as whispers had exploded into a torrent of leaks, evidence, and betrayal that no one could have imagined. Inside the courtroom, decades of secrecy crumbled. Michael took the stand first. He didn't read notes or deliver a rehearsed speech. He locked eyes on the defense table, voice quivering but firm. "You stole my childhood. For years, I carried your secret like a chain around my neck. But not anymore." Gasps echoed. Tears fell. Others shouted, "Amen." Security rushed in, but the chaos only grew. Then David spoke. His testimony was darker still, recounting nights of fear, manipulation, and enforced silence. His voice cracked. "I thought God would punish me if I spoke." But the real punishment was living with the truth. The courtroom fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. The prosecution then revealed hidden evidence, decades-old recordings from an unnamed insider. On them, a younger Hale muttered about failing those who trusted him and seeking forgiveness for sins he could not name aloud. 7 minutes of tense audio left jurors shaken. Some bowed their heads, others clenched fists. Outside, protest and counter-protest clashed again. Police deployed barricades, and helicopters hovered overhead. Social media exploded. Clips of fainting church members went viral. One image, a woman collapsing while clutching Hale's best-selling book, became the symbol of betrayed faith, heartbreak captured in a single moment. Then came the final bombshell. A former church accountant stepped forward, revealing decades of hidden financial maneuvers. Millions of dollars had supposedly been funneled into fake charitable projects, hush payments, destroyed documents, and secret relocations of victims. Screenshots of financial ledgers surfaced, labeled vaguely as community outreach or special aid. The tragedy deepened. A well-known gospel singer revealed in a televised interview that she had been pressured into silence after discovering disturbing truths about Hale. Tears streamed as she said, "I sang on his stage, but behind the curtain, I knew things that broke my soul. I thought silence was protecting the church. Now I see it was protecting him." The clip went viral, racking up tens of millions of views in days.